So, I got the chance to visit my old high school buddy, Danny, shortly after I graduated college. I was going to stay a few days with him and his new wife, Carolyn. So, I packed a few days worth of clothes and drive to Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. I get there, and it's hot as a motherfucker and just as humid. We say our hellos, introduces me to Carolyn, and we head inside to eat dinner. Carolyn seems nice, somewhat reserved but curious about me and my friendship with Danny as kids. She lets me and Danny do most of the talking, but asks some good questions to steer along the conversation. Lots of smiles she was. After dinner, she and Danny cleaned up and I got to spend some time getting acquainted with their dog, Truman. He's small, shook all the time, and never shut the hell up. One of those yippy dogs that thinks it's bigger than everything else around it. He didn't bite though, so I didn't really mind. Once the table was clear, Carolyn leashed up Truman and took him out for a walk. Danny and I moved to the living room and caught up over the last few years. He had popped open a beer and was really enjoying the AC, as was I. We somewhat lost track of time, and Danny had noticed that it had grown dark, and that Carolyn was usually back by now. He didn't seem too concerned, as sometimes she took Truman out for a long walk around the neighborhood. It's a small one, and close to the edge of the state park, where there are a lot of hiking paths that lead off. Some circle around and back to the street, so it's a good way to get a nice walk in. We keep talking, and I realize that nearly an hour has passed since she left. Danny has kept eyeing the time on his phone, and he finally picks it up to text her. Even on the long walks, she's not usually out this long. Just as he hits send, the front door opens. Truman shoots through the door. He didn't make a damn sound, as he sulked straight under the couch and didn't come out. I can't see out the door from where I'm sitting, but I caught a slight whiff of something foul. I can't really describe it, but it was strong enough to leave the taste of copper in my mouth. The smell went away just as quick as it had come, and slowly, Carolyn steps into the house. She was slow and shuffling. There was a slight hunch to her, like she was worn out, and damn did she look it. Her knees had a slight gait to them as she walked in, leaving the door open behind her. After a few paces, she stopped, still holding the leash, and not turning to face either of us. Danny shot up, and after closing the door, went up to Carolyn, asking if everything was fine. He slowly turned her to face him, as she looked really woozy, like she was about to fall over. Her mouth worked open and shut a few times, like she was trying to find the right thing to say, but nothing was coming out. Finally, she was able to wheeze out, "Fine," though it sounded anything but. Danny felt her forehead, then mumbled something about getting her some water and aspirin, and left for the kitchen. It took me a moment for the creepy feelings to settle in on me. It wasn't the smell or the awkward shuffling that did it. When I think back on it, I believe it was when I finally noticed that ever since she stepped through that damn door, she didn't once blink. Being all gentlemanly, I asked Carolyn if she wanted to sit down and offered to take the leash. I was a bit nervous, but not enough to still feel helpful. As I reached down to gently take the leash from her, I realized something else. I mean, it could have been half the beer I had, or the fact that I had just finished driving 8 hours to get here that day, but I could swear that her right arm was slightly longer than her left. By slightly, I mean by at least a few inches. It could have been the way she was slightly hunched over, or maybe her left arm was bent in such a way that I didn't notice, but the entire proportion just seemed off. Still not taking the tingling hint to get the fuck out of there, I asked her if she did anything to hurt her arm. She slowly turned her head to regard me. "Arm," she repeated, then twisted her head down to regard it, like just now noticing it was there. I shit you not when I say that her arm spasmed as she eyed it. Then, after a few cracks and pops, it seemed to shrink down to the right size. She then turned back to me for a moment, then shuffled past me into the hallway bathroom, the door closing behind her. It was at this point that I noped right the fuck into the kitchen, where Danny was just coming out. I grabbed him by the arm and pulled him back into the kitchen. I told him that I think something was very wrong with Carolyn and explained what I just saw. He stood quiet for a few moments, listening to me, his eyes looking behind me into the living room. He finally said, "I'll go check on her. She should be fine, though." He looked like he was trying to convince himself more than me. He went and knocked on the bathroom door before entering. The door was closed behind him, and after a few minutes, I could only hear his muffled voice. I was still creeped the fuck out, but stood my ground, waiting to see if I needed to shift into full fight or flight mode. Not long after, the door opened and Danny stepped out with Carolyn not far behind him. He smiled at me and said, "It looks like she just got overwhelmed by the heat. I'm going to go ahead and take her up to bed. I'll be back down in a minute." I then looked at Carolyn, who was holding the water bottle that Danny had brought her. It was half gone, so it seemed to click with me that she could have just been dehydrated. But Jesus, that arm. I can't just unsee that shit. He helped her upstairs, and as they were climbing, I thought I could hear Carolyn rasp out, "Be back." I wanted to nope right back into my car and drive off. But that would instantly turn me into Mr. Shitty Friend. And social pressure finally won over instinctual fear. Frustrated, I sat down on the recliner and eyed Truman, still huddled under the couch. He hadn't made a single noise since getting home, and he looked scared shitless. I gently patted my knee to call him out, and he refused to budge. Well, fuck him. I tried. It was dark and quiet, and I didn't realize that I had calmed down enough to doze off. It took a real fucking weird sound from upstairs to wake me. It was quiet and muffled, but low enough to rumble the seat slightly. It was a repeated sound, and the only thing I can compare it to was a giant cat hawking a hairball. I'm not sure why I was stupid enough to do this. Probably that sense of duty among friends. But I got my ass out of that chair and slowly made my way upstairs. That guttural hawking noise didn't stop, and it was definitely coming from Danny and Carolyn's room. That foul stench was back and pretty damn potent. The combo of the smell and the noise was almost enough to empty my own guts. I reached the door, which was, of course, closed, and I was getting closer and closer to flipping the fuck out as I neared it. "Why am I doing this? What the hell are you doing, Anon? Get the fuck out!" I thought to myself. But no, I didn't. Not for a few more minutes, anyway. I knocked on the door, hoping they were doing some kind of kinky fucking that I didn't want to picture. The retching sound continued. I stood there looking like an awkward dumbass for a minute, before knocking again. This time asking, "Is, everything alright in there?" More hawking and retching. The damn noise wasn't letting up. I steeled myself in case my friend was in some real trouble. I wanted to know what to describe to the cops when I decided to finally call them. I reached for the doorknob and twisted it open. What I saw was all in the span of a few seconds before I registered enough to decide to nope straight the hell out of the house and drive away. It looked like Carolyn. Almost. The top half of her was really wide, and her naked, sagging breasts inflated and deflated like respiratory masks. Not sure why my eyes caught sight of her breasts first. Probably because I'm a guy, fuck if I know. What should have caught my attention first were the two monstrosities poking out of her shoulder blades, like an extra set of arms or some shit. Only somewhat bony and jointed, like the limbs of a flesh-colored insect. They arched over her and back down onto the bed in front of her. I then noticed her mouth. It was wide open, far wider than what it should have been. Something was emerging from it, like a dark and wet sack of something, and her entire body was convulsing as the thing slid further out of her mouth. It was hanging over what I finally noticed was Danny. Her body was so wide that I at first didn't see him underneath her. Danny was quite dead, or unconscious with a shit ton of blood loss. Red was everywhere. The bed, the walls, the floor. It was especially all over Carolyn, though I doubt much, if any, was hers. Without stopping whatever the fuck ritual she was doing of her husband, she looked up. This was when I noped down the stairs, grabbed the keys off the counter, said fuck it to the bag of clothes I left upstairs, and drove the hell away. I would like to say that I called the police right then. I didn't. My God, I didn't. I drove for 4 hours, constantly checking my rear view until I couldn't see straight, and then stopped at the next motel, bolted the doors, and slept with all the lights on. In the morning, I called the authorities and placed an anonymous tip to have them check Danny's address. It was after a week since returning home that I had Googled their names. A small article appeared on the local news site that stated he and Carolyn were missing from their residence. No sign of forced entry or any blood or struggle. The only puzzle was that their cars were both left parked in the garage. I can still hear that retching, feel the vibration of it on my chest. It makes me glad that I never gave Danny my new address. Hey X, I'm a night guard at an oil refinery, and I had something happen to me that I can't really explain. Bear with me as I'm typing this on my phone. So, I was here at the refinery last night, same as most nights. Everything was normal, every once in a while opening a gate for the decoker and gas flipper trains to move around. Now, to elaborate about how the nights are. The refinery isn't too well lit. Also, a few miles away is the rail yard, and there are only 2 lights in the whole thing. There are only about 50 people counting the 3 other guards in a 5-mile wide refinery. Anyway, it got to be around 12:30 a.m., and nothing out of the ordinary had happened. But for some reason, I got a really sick feeling to my stomach. Like, I could feel something weird in my bones. I couldn't shake it off, even tried watching some anime on Netflix on my iPad. I just had a really bad feeling something was wrong. When it gets to about 2:30, one of the trains needed in the rail yard. I wasn't on around, so I went to open it up. As I get into the rail yard and get out of my truck to unlock the gate, which is nearly completely in darkness, I get a sudden rush of adrenaline, like I had just done a line of coke. So I hurry and push the gate open and run back to my truck. I let the main guard at the SOC know the gate was open. About 15 minutes pass as the train switches tracks, picks up new cars, and I calm down substantially. Nothing even happened. Why was I freaking out? Train leaves and I go to close the gate, back in the darkness. As I walk to the back of the gate to begin pushing it shut, the SOC guard comes over the radio and says, "Garrett, the person you're wanting to talk to went home." "What are you talking about, SOC?" "The only person I know at the plant is my dad, and he works daylights." "When you called here a minute ago and asked me to have someone call you, just call my cell phone again real fast." "SOC, I don't know your cell phone number." He pauses for a few minutes. "It's insert phone number." So I call the number. "Hey, what are you talking about, man? Your dad already went home." "I know that, SOC. He went home at 6. And I never called your phone. I didn't know your number." By now, I was kind of freaked out. "Well, they sounded exactly like you and said, 'Hey, SOC, it's Garrett. Can you have my dad call me? I need him to meet me ASAP.'" What the actual fuck? What's going on? I tell SOC to call the number back that called him. He does so, and calls me back to tell me, "That's weird. The number is disconnected now." At this, I tell SOC thanks and hang up. I'm on the verge of a panic attack, close, unlock the gate, and sprint to my truck and start it up. As my truck starts, the headlights come on. My truck is facing some semi-dense woods. I swear on whatever any of you believe, I saw myself running in the opposite direction. I don't know how to explain it, but the second I saw whatever it was that looked like me, I felt like I had been shot with a 10-gauge slug. I have never been more scared in my life. I turn around and floor it out of there, back towards the refinery. Who was that? Why did they look like me? How did they get into the rail yard? I'm shaking just thinking about it, but it gets worse. I did just as one of you suggested. When I got back to the refinery, I called my dad and told him exactly what happened. That doesn't make sense, son. Dan, the SOC guard, has known you for years. He wouldn't mistake your voice for someone else. I know, Dad, but what about the person in the rail yard that looked like me? I don't know, but I don't like this. Okay, well, be careful, Dad. Don't go anywhere tonight. I love you. Love you too, Dad. We hang up. My heart is still pounding in my chest at this point. A few minutes after this, I have to do a plant round, inside and out. So naturally, I do the inside first, dreading going back to the rail yard. As I'm about 2/3 of the way done, and in the back of the plant, where there's just open grass and fence, I get some fuzzy static on my radio. These radios aren't top quality. Sometimes we get bleeding from other channels. Where are you, Dad? Holy fucking shit, that's me. That voice was definitely mine. I slam on my brakes and ask if the SOC heard that. Heard what? Nothing. Never mind. Great. I'm going insane. As I'm rounding the last curve to get back to the best lit part of the plant, a truck on the back road of the outside of the plant is coming my way. Just naturally, I look at it as they are driving by, and I regret looking. As I peered into the truck, I locked eyes with myself. No doubt in my mind, it was me. I nearly pissed myself and sped up. I stooped at the main gate and told the other guard what I saw and what's been happening. They didn't believe a word I said. So I am still panicked and nearly in tears about having to go check the rail yard. I felt like I was being watched, and I could feel the malice in it. As I'm driving to the rail yard on the back roads, it was probably close to 3:30 when I arrived. I was terrified. I just sat near the entrance, too scared to look around. All I could do was stare straight ahead. I took a deep breath to calm myself. It's just my eyes playing tricks on me. I get to go home at 6. I'm almost done. My reassurances did nothing to help keep my heart from leaping into my throat at every inch of darkness I saw while driving. I finish my round quickly and see nothing out of the ordinary, but I still have a feeling of terror. Nothing else really interesting happened the rest of the night, aside from seeing flashes of movement in the corners of my eyes. That was last night. When I woke up around 2 p.m. today, I swear I saw myself across the street going into my neighbor's house. I'm back at work again tonight, and I keep getting weird static on my radio, but no voices. Am I losing my mind? What am I supposed to do? Seriously, what do doppelgangers want with the original? I'm scared, guys. I don't know if it wants me or my dad. Hey, X. I've got something that's happened to me recently that I wanted to share. I work for a larger farm in the northeastern US. My parents own a small farm, so I know firsthand how different things can be on both. For example, if your big farm has enough workers, you can get sick days, which is what I had to take 3 days ago. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. It was how I think I got sick that is more interesting. I'm in charge of rounding up the pastured animals in the A group for milking in the mornings and evenings. It was really nice out, even for 5 in the morning, and the sun was just rising. Most cows sleep together out in the open. Some fuckers go hiding in the forest where it's harder to take my four-wheeler, which is what I saw a group of them doing. So it was by foot and into the underbrush I went. And that was where things went wrong. I had dismounted right where I could see the cows, and only had to make a few turns and dips in deer paths to get to the lazy fuckers. I get to the group of 4 and rouse them and chase them out of the woods. One of them is a big old girl who bullies people because she's bigger and knows that she's better than you. So she took a swing with her head at me a few times. Cue my calling her an ugly old bitch, and that she's lucky she was pregnant or else I would sell her personally. She completely ignores me and ambles off with the rest of a little posse to the larger stream of animals heading down through the pasture. At this moment, I'm not too worried about heading out after them, since I'm one of 5 people that herds the animals. I was caught on a patch of brambles and trying to get free when this eerie, piercing squeal comes up from further in the forest. Just thinking about it gives me the chills. It sounded kind of like a deer screaming, but it was way too loud. I was standing there, caught in a thorn patch, waiting for it to happen again when I heard this strange shuffling to my right. I really don't know what it was. It looked vaguely like a naked human, arms, leg, torso, but they were all way too long and thin. Its arms and legs all bowed out. It was walking towards me, backwards, with these really horribly jerky movements. It seemed to try to be looking at me over its shoulder, and all I could see were these bulbous yellow eyes. And teeth. These awful, needle-like teeth. Nope, not JPEG. Fuck the brambles, fuck everything. I scrambled the hell out, proceeding to shred my flesh and clothes in the process. I hear this massive crashing, but at that point was too fucking terrified to look to see if it was the abomination or not. My four-wheeler was still there and running, by some miracle, but was facing the direction of the woods, which I wasn't sure I had done. I jumped on, which made me face the woods again. The thing was nowhere in sight, but I didn't really stop to examine the brush line. I turned around in a tight circle and got the fuck out of there. When I finally got down into the main pasture, the tail end of the line was heading into the barn, and 3 of the other herders were at the bottom chatting. They all looked up when they saw me driving up. One of them raised his arms in a "what the hell happened?" gesture, but I didn't give him time to speak before I had jumped off and was talking to them. I told them everything that had happened and what I had seen, not even stopping to think that they might think I was crazy. They all looked a little uncomfortable, and not just a little scared, but because of how scared I was. They didn't think I was lying, and probably how I kept looking over my shoulder to see if the thing had finally made its way out of the woods or not. One of the guys called the herdsman, the guy that's in charge of the cows, and told them there was a situation in the A group. Nothing terribly specific, just I had seen an unsub in the woods, and it looked more dangerous to people than cows. I got reassigned to milking to finish my shift, so I didn't have to go back out. And everyone considered that to be the end of that. Except it wasn't. As I was helping prep for milking, I started feeling shaky and chilly. I figured I was just coming down from an adrenaline high, but as milking progressed, this was clearly not the case. Several of the milkers commented on how pale I was, and were alarmed at the scratches on my arms and face. It looked like an animal had attacked me. I told them I had only got caught in some thorns before one of them took a picture of me with her phone and showed me what I looked like. It really did look like an animal had attacked me. I'm talking claw marks on my neck and on my arms. I even had a black eye I had no idea I'd even had. Needless to say, this freaked me out pretty badly, to the point where one of the milkers called the herdsman and told me to go to the office so I could check out and go home. Nobody really wanted me to be on my own, so one of the milkers walked me over from the milking parlor to the office, which was like 50 feet away, but I was still glad for the company. Being outside made me start looking for the thing again. The herdsman was in the office, along with my boyfriend, who's the herdsman's nephew. The herdsman is a co-owner of the farm, so he can basically make executive decisions about the shit that goes on. And they'd already decided that my boyfriend would take me home. At this point, I didn't want to be alone a lot more than I wanted to rest though, so there was some deliberation. And my condition was going rapidly downhill. I was so gone with fever at that point that I couldn't really understand what anyone was saying. All I could hear was this long, drawn-out scraping, like something big was rubbing up against the side of the office. I cut into the discussion, asking if a cow was loose, because I thought I could hear one outside. This got me a funny look, but my boyfriend went to one of the windows to look outside. Apparently, there was something out there, but it was human rather than animal, and they were standing in the gravel driveway. My boyfriend had said, "Hello, and "Can I help you?" to the person, and had turned to go to the door so he could speak more normally to the person. The conversation went something like, "What can I do for you?" Silence. "Is there anything we can help you with?" Silence. "All right, if you need anything, you let us know." Silence. He and the herdsman had another short deliberation about who the fuck was outside and why they were so weird. The herdsman went to talk to the guy, and my boyfriend turned back to me to get up out of the office's couch so I could go home. "Well, he's gone." Both my boyfriend and I were what the fucking. How could the guy be just gone? My boyfriend decided I would ride in a tractor with him for the next 7 hours instead of going home, which I heartily endorsed. His other option was that I go to the doctor's, which we fought about, and I eventually won. I really didn't want to be alone, and possibly run up against a guy. I hadn't taken into consideration that the fields my boyfriend was working in were surrounded by woods, however. I spent most of the entire time staring at them, waiting for something to come out. It was only around 8:30 when my boyfriend finally decided he was done with work and parking that I did see something. Way off on the other side of the field he'd been working, I saw something standing between the trees. It was definitely a person, but they just kept standing there, motionless. It felt like they were staring at me, just like I was staring at them. I went home and had to be taken to the doctor in the middle of the night. My fever was too high, and I wasn't getting better. That was 5 days ago. I'm feeling marginally better now, but I'm still sick and exhausted. Sadly, I haven't even worked up enough courage to look out the fucking window this morning to check the tree line to see if the fucker is there. Every now and again, I think I'll see someone standing in the trees or something. Since I saw whatever the fuck I saw, some weird shit has happened on the farm. The office came up trashed one morning, like a wild animal had gone through it. Nothing valuable was taken, and the foodstuffs in it was strewn around. Also, there were a few bloody smears in high places that looked like handprints, which is probably what persuaded the owners to call the police. Some of the workers have been complaining about seeing a stranger hanging around the farm, but no two people agree on what he looks like. Some people who live close to the farm have even said they've seen the stranger following them home, but was easily frightened away with the threat of bodily harm. One of the guys has said he thought he saw an animal out on his porch the other night. He said he saw its eyes reflecting in the field, and decided he wouldn't bother it until it got up to the door, which was when he opened the door and greeted said animal with a face full of shotgun. He's probably 60 or so, and a ballsy motherfucker. He said it looked like a coy dog, except bigger than any he's ever seen. No one's reported seeing the thing I saw initially, but then, who would really?